Hello. Welcome to the Moving to Canada live stream webinar. My name is Stephen Tighe. I am back as your host, and I am joined today by the formidable, by the amazing Flora Wu. Flora, would you like to introduce yourself properly to the masses?
Hi everyone, thank you for spending time with us today. I am Flora. I am a manager at a New to Canada strategy team at Scotiabank. I came here when I was 15 for high school and have been in Canada ever since 2011. So really happy to be here to share my experiences and thoughts with all of you today. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of your questions and comments.
Amazing, and we are very happy to have you. It's I'd say a lot of people who watch regularly are sick and tired of hearing me talk about coming from Ireland and being here only 2 years. So having someone with your wealth of experience is wonderful. I just want to give a little bit of disclaimer to everyone who is watching at the moment, guys, that this is not going to deal visas or the nuances of how to apply to move to Canada. Instead, we want to set up how you can best succeed when you are making that move. So choosing the right place to live, all the rest of that stuff. But before we get into the meat and potatoes of this live stream, we must give our necessary disclaimer card. So here we go. Oh, disclaimer cards. They are lovely. Right, what will we be talking about today? So we are going to be looking at all the things that we feel is necessary to know to set yourself up for the best chance of success in your first year of Canada. That's going to include choosing the right destination, job hunting, starting work, accommodation, that crucial first week in Canada, getting settled, and most importantly, maybe to this whole thing, because a lot of them can't happen without it, is finances. Budgeting, credit, insurance. Flora, I imagine you're going to be significantly more in tune with this than I am. But yeah, this is what we're going to be looking at. Like, Flora, anything that excites you here?
Everything. I think moving to Canada is such a great platform that provides so much good resources for newcomers, and I'm happy to share my experiences on all of the categories. There's so much that you have to pay attention to, as you're exploring the journey, but then also arrive. So happy to see all of you here, and I'm excited to share my stories.
Super. Well, let's jump right in to our next slide, which is choosing the right destination. Flora, destination in Canada, choosing where to live. It's the second biggest country in the world, and I know personally, I did not understand the size of this place when I got here. I don't understand it still at times. What's your take on choosing where to live when you do arrive in Canada?
So when I came here for high school, I actually have a family relative who were in Canada before. And because I was a kid at that time. So my choice was, of course, to stay as close as possible to my aunt, and I chose a high school around the area, right? But as I was growing sort of out of, the international student journey as a high school student, I went to Queens in Kingston. So that was like more of a town or suburb, maybe the middle category, which was completely different from, Toronto area, right? And now that I'm, a little bit, couple of years in my career, there's a lot of other considerations that you have to make in terms of, affordability, lifestyle. So we're more of like a small town. I don't know, like probably in the middle, like the middle and the third category right now. Live in a house and with the dog. It's just different lifestyles, and depending on what your needs and wants are, there are many different options that Canada has to offer as a country.
For sure, and I think the big cities do tend to attract people instinctively. There's a lot of job opportunities, a lot of other things, but I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, what is your lifestyle? What are you looking for? Because that's going to ultimately decide where you move to. Vancouver, Toronto, Calgary is a growing popularity at the moment. Town or suburbs, loads of places. Rural is interesting because there's also potential for some immigration programs that don't pop up in other places. Our social media manager, Sarah, has given Osias, British Columbia. I have never got that name right in the 2 years I've lived here. In short, though, there's plenty of options. There's plenty of options for anyone and anyone's desires and needs. Yeah, let's move on to our next slide and see what factors should you take into consideration. We spoke very, very briefly on job opportunities. From your own experience, Flora, job opportunities in relation to where you're living, has that changed? Because you've been in Canada through that whole pandemic thing. Remote work has become more common. Do you notice a difference in job opportunities tied with location to the same degree as it once was?
I would say there are tons of job opportunities everywhere, no matter where you live, just in different areas and in the different industries, right? So for me, for example, I've been in Toronto ever since I graduated from university, and I work in the finance and banking industry, right? Which is, Toronto and probably a little bit of Vancouver as the central hubs. But if you're thinking about it, if you are interested in oil and gas industry, right, then that's probably like Alberta and Calgary, which has tons of opportunities there. But in the meantime, like a lot of the frontline, like Scotiabank branches, for example, are everywhere in the country, right? Like no matter where you are in the rural area or the suburbs area, there are tons of job opportunities that are available. I think it's just really important to think about your past experiences, right? And look at what area of the country has those more concentrated job opportunities as well, right?
For,
Um,
for sure. And
that's
I
about
think,
it.
yeah, no, I mean, it's great. I think you hit the nail on the head there. And I think, with job opportunities becomes financial freedom and independence. But then that also ties into the cost of living. There is, look, I don't know for certain whether this is true. So no one quote me and no one slam this back at me. I have heard that Toronto salaries tend to be more than Vancouver salaries on average. So cost of living versus average salaries of cities per jobs, something to take into account when you are doing your research about where you'd like to move to. Um, has that cost of living risen as much as it has here in Vancouver for yourself, Flora, in Ontario?
So, from what I've heard, I've never lived in Vancouver before, but I know Vancouver is pretty expensive in terms of cost of living as well. Salary wise, I think, if you're in the like Toronto area, is definitely higher. Like, even if you look at the bank's sort of salary guide, we do it by region as well. So, Toronto ones are definitely higher just because the cost of living is higher, right? When you think about rent, when you think about groceries, when you think about all of the other living expenses that you have to occur, whereas the rural areas it will be relatively cheaper in terms of rent, or you can get groceries directly from farmers markets, which
Yeah,
is very affordable, versus you know the big corporations like Metro or other supermarkets that usually have the markup.
for sure.
So that cost of living is definitely a impacting factor for salary as well.
For sure, and I think it's also important to note that while the cost of living will tend to go down if you get somewhere a little bit more rural, if you go real rural, it will go up massively. If you're heading up to the Northwest Territories to the Yukon, you might expect to see grocery prices and bills going way way up. But that is for a different live stream. How your family will fare is an interesting one. I came over here 2 years ago with my partner. We were both fully functioning adults to the best of our abilities, being millennials. You came at a different time. You were 15 years old, I believe.
Yeah.
How do you think that
Well,
family
I came here
dynamic?
myself.
Yeah, wow. So how do you think that dynamic
Um,
impacts the decision of moving?
so for me, it was a little interesting. I know a lot of, international students who are coming around this like young age to leave their guardians or chaperones, and they're usually sort of like sent to Canada. For me, it was a little bit different. I wanted to come to North America just because I feel like it's the right lifestyle and like study style for me. So for me, I was really happy and excited that my family actually was comfortable for me to come here, and I'm excited about every single thing that I had to experience in my past few years, in past 10, 11 years now in Canada. But family is an important consideration, right? Like now in my sort of life stage, my parents are thinking about maybe potentially immigrating to Canada, right? And then now I'm thinking about, okay, if they do decide to come to Canada in the future, where they will live, how we're going to live together, and things like that. It's important to consider that, especially if you're coming with your children or a partner. If you're a city person, doesn't mean that your partner is a city person, right? It's important to talk things through, and then education as well, which we'll touch on later.
For sure. Climate is another big one. It's pretty well known. Canada is the great white, the true north, but it's very different based on where you move to. How did you adapt to the climate when you moved over?
Oh my gosh. So, you know how we're going to talk about first week in Canada? I think
Yes.
depending on where, like when you move to Canada, your first week might look a little different as well. So I came here in January 2011, which was like, very heavy in terms of snow. So it was definitely a shock for me. I was like, I've never seen that much snow ever in my life. And my aunt at that time took me to get like, the snow boots, snow gear, just so I could survive, right? Because the things I brought over was definitely not suitable for this weather. So it is important to consider climate, right? Like, would you be okay with like 20 centimeters snow if you're thinking about like Saskatchewan, for example, right? Toronto has a little bit less snow than Saskatchewan. Vancouver has a lot of rain, not as much snow. But for me, I'd rather have snow versus rain. So that's why I'm in the Toronto area, but it's up to, what you prefer, right?
Yeah, snow any day of the week for me. Get a snowboard, go enjoy your winters. The rain, I am so happy to have left it behind. Let's quickly look at culture because this is another interesting one based on the cities you're or city or place, should I say? Because we're getting a lot of comments I see coming through, people saying rural over cities. What's your experience of culture and that dynamic in choosing a place to live?
I think one thing I love about Canada is that it's such a multicultural and welcoming place to be. It's also depending on like sort of the population density as well, right? Like if you're in Toronto area, which is something I'm super excited and thankful about, you get to experience all kinds of different cultures. And by culture, my primary focus is food. So when I'm in Toronto, there's always all kinds of like, really authentic like Vietnamese cuisines, like Filipino food, like Spanish and, Chinese, of course, lots of different options. But then, in the rural area where I am in as well, there are also lots of different cultures just because, new immigrants are considering those opportunities as well, right? So if you're thinking about my neighbors, which are like really far from Toronto in terms of a commute time. I have Chinese neighbors, I have neighbors from India, I have neighbors who are brand new to the country as well from Trinidad and, England as well. So there is definitely lots of diversity and things to be excited about, and you will be able to find your community as you settle in Canada.
That's so true. So true. The diversity that you see here, and it's so nice to see it and have that opportunity to. I mean, food is a huge one to sample those cultures, those cuisines. Accommodation, another interesting one. I don't think it's any surprise or secret that Canada is having a bit of a housing crisis. Choosing where to live in terms of availability of accommodation might be something to take into account. Any thoughts on that, or quality of accommodation, or I suppose accommodation in general?
Yeah, so I think so. When I came as a high school student, I had a room with my aunt, or in the later down, it was a host family. I think up until university, it was just renting a room or living in residences by myself, right? And then as I develop as a person, moving on to the next stage of my life. I got cats and I got a boyfriend, now my partner. There are different things that we were thinking about in terms of accommodation, right? But there are so many opportunities and different things to choose from. Like in Canada, you have condos, right? Like you have apartments, you have townhouse apartments, you have townhouses and houses. You also have different, like, you know, I guess areas that you could choose all of those type of accommodations from, right? So
Hmm.
it's really about what you want, what you need, but then also what you can afford at the same time as well.
For sure. Let's nip on to the next slide because I would love to make sure we give a load of time for questions. I do see them coming through at mass here in the comments over here. If I ever am looking at this side of the screen, Flora, I'm not trying to be rude. This is where I see all the questions come through. Job hunting, things that can help you secure a job. We get asked so frequently, how do you find a job in Canada? There is a lot of talk about Canadian work experience, but no matter where the journey begins, it should begin with an updated resume. Any tips or tricks or insight into resumes that you've experienced from your time living here?
Yeah, for sure. And that's my experience, but then also a lot of the experience shared from my network of professionals that I have as well. So previously, I think HRs used to still screen resumes like using their eyes. Nowadays, a lot of the companies do use technology to help them to screen keywords in those resumes. So, really, the best practice is to tailor your resume to the job and to the keyword they're mentioning in the job description, right? I understand it is challenging sometimes to do that much manual work when you're applying for jobs, but if you do that, the chance of you getting the first round of HR interview is higher versus using the same sort of resume for all of the jobs you're applying to, right? So that's very crucial, and that's feedback from a lot of my HR friends as well.
For sure, AI is here to stay, and it's in resumes already. So make sure you know about it. I will put my hand up and confess. I will blanket employers with the same thing. You don't get anything back. You're just sitting there wondering why not, and the employer is probably reading your things saying like, "Well, where's the value here?" So that's really good insight into it. Let's say we get that first interview, Flora. Interview skills. I meet with people from time to time who buy me a coffee and ask for some advice about moving to Canada. And my number one thing is get rid of anything you know about your own country and how it works and how you engage with people. Canada is different. There's a different culture here. And what I tell them is don't be afraid to talk yourself up and don't be afraid to own the achievements you have. What's your thoughts on this in the interview room?
I think 100% agree with you on that, Stephen. When it comes to interviews, I do find that Canada does a really great job in terms of providing transparency and inclusion for a lot of people in the workforce. So that's super super great about Canada. I think when you're preparing for interviews, depending on what kind of culture you're from, and that way you said, Stephen, as well, like, growing up from China, I was sort of raised in a situation where we are taught to be humble and modest, right? But honestly, don't feel shy to talk up yourself, to really show off your previous experiences, show off all of the transferable skills that you have, right? Even though you may not have the whole like Canadian experience that a lot of employers may claim they're looking for, but it's really about how you sell yourself, right, to the employer and how you can contribute to the company. And when you're doing a lot of these answering for this interview questions and a lot of the behavioral questions, right, utilize some of the models that you see on those I guess job hunting websites, right? Use model like STAR, right? Talk about situation, the task, right? What is your result that you actually achieved. There are so many resources available online that will help you to prepare, but don't be shy and be proud of what you've achieved, and you'll do great.
Absolutely. I think transferable skills is a great one. I don't know if I've ever said it on camera, but I studied classical acting for years in university. That's like no one's giving you a job really, but transferable skills are huge. So learning how to advocate yourself, I think, is crucial. Flora, thank you so much. Staying the course and correcting or learning is a very interesting one. There is some people, Flora, who arrive in Canada and they get what we call in moving to Canada a survival job and find themselves stuck there. Uh, we are of the belief that, look, everyone needs to make money. You need to make sure you can pay rent and get your grocery bills, but you need to also make sure that you're moving to a country and making the most for yourself. Are you under the same kind of impression, or how can people go from that survival job to, something else that is more where they want to be in their career or in their workplace?
Um, I think that's totally reasonable, right? Like when you first come to Canada, you may not land the ideal dream job you want. And it could be because, just timing and perspective, it will take time to find
Mm.
the ideal job. And second, there might be like certifications that you need to achieve before you can actually be considered for those jobs, right? So I would, pat yourself on the back and be like, it's totally fine. I'm making money to support my family. I'm proud of what I'm doing. But in the meantime, do networking, right? Like reaching out to your friends and family, or your friends and family who knows other people in the areas that you want to go in. But then at the same time, look for, what are the certificates or the courses or the key skills that they're looking for in this area, right? For example, if you want to work in a branch as a financial advisor, there are, courses that you have to pass before they can consider you, or before they can at least show that you're involved in those courses, or like working towards those certifications before they really see you as a valuable candidate, right? Really, I would say stay positive, pat yourself on the back. It's okay to have a survival job, but network and do all the right things, and you'll be okay. Utilize your network.
That is such a calming peace of mind. I wish I could have you just beside me, just giving me reassurance all the time, Flora. That's lovely. And so right. Like courses, something that didn't even come into my head. Do the research. What are the courses? Because then also, do I need to set money aside to budget for these courses? Is this part of my moving journey? Very, very well said. Let us move on to the next slide, which is starting work. Uh, Folks, Flora and I had a very brief conversation before we went live in the stream about workplace culture in Canada. I was explaining that for a year and a half, I worked completely remote, talking into a camera to you fine folks. Since moved to an office culture, and it's been quite the shift. Flora, what's your experience of workplace culture in Canada, and what should people expect?
I would say workplace culture in Canada is really good compared to a lot of, you know, like our home countries, I would say. Especially like from my experience working in China, not working, interning in China, still working. It is a little bit more intense in terms of the demand, but just because the level of competition that you have in China as well, right? And then people do expect different things from you. But here in Canada, like I said before, everyone is super supportive and inclusive, and the workplace is a safe place for everyone. And, Canada is such a big supporter and driver in terms of work-life balance. Since the pandemic, a lot of companies have worked remotely, and a lot of the companies do decide to keep that because they see the value of people paying attention to life and work at the same time. And a lot of leaders are realizing that, right? Like, work is really just a way for people to make money and support themselves, and life is what is more important for a lot of people, right? And from my experience working at Scotiabank, and a lot of my other friends and classmates who work at different companies as well. I think it also depending on what kind of company you work for. Like, for some of the other industries, it may be a little bit more intense.
Hmm.
Um, but generally speaking, it is very inclusive and welcoming. So,
For sure, and it's definitely been my experience as well. Positive traction in your career or working your way up through the ladder of employment. What's your experience with this yourself, Flora, having gone through student to now live streaming with random people on a Thursday morning?
thanks, Stephen. I am very happy to be here. I love to talk and, to my friends and coworkers or random people that we're talking to online right now. In terms of traction, positive traction in my career, I think it's about networking and being a bit more focused on your career development. What my mentors and I like to say is you're the owner of your own development, right? Like a lot of people might think that, oh, I'm waiting for my boss to come to me and be like, okay, drive those conversations, but really you should be the one driving a lot of those conversations and be like, this is the area you want to go to and this is the timeline we're thinking about. you know this is what I think the team can support, and if you can do something or anything about that, right? So that's one perspective. Just be very proactive and be the owner of your own development. And the other thing is network and be mindful of your network as well, right? Like, you know, there are two different approaches. One is to meet as many people as possible, which is going to be a part of your settling life in Canada in terms of just meeting people in the community, start talking to people in the work or in churches and whatever, right? But you know, keep in touch with those people that you're meeting and talking to because you never know what's going to come up, right? Like, one of the days down the road, they might have a role that's open that's you're interested in, and if you keep in touch with them and they know what you're doing, what your previous roles are like, they will probably think of you, and then they might even put in a referral for you, right? So really two things, be proactive, but then also network.
For sure, two great pieces of advice, and yeah, something to think about when you're trying to build up that old career and build up your salary and build up your life here in Canada. Let us jump to the next slide, but before we do, I just want to let everyone know who is sending all the questions through here. We will be answering them. They will be coming in at the end, so do keep sending them in. I've seen some great conversation about tips about employers and employment. So yeah, keep them coming, and we will be looking at them in a couple of minutes. Now, let's look at finding accommodation in Canada. Two main ways to do this, other than obviously going through a third-party short-term rental. But the big one is renting in Canada. What can you afford? What's included? How to find available units? And then buying, which, Flora, I'm really interested to hear your take on working in the financial sector. But in terms of renting, what's been your experience?
The only time, well, so in high school, I was staying with host families. So really, it was my family paying the school boards, and the host families had a room for me, and food and everything was included. It was great. I wish I could do that. And it was like
The dream.
university, first year was residence. It was similar to host families. And then second, third, and fourth year, we had to rent, with our friends in Kingston at that time. It was definitely interesting journey. First, think about, do you want to rent yourself? For me, it was like I can't stand just being myself. I'm a very people person. So I had to leave with other people. So, right, like think about, okay, who do you want to live with, right? And then you guys get together and think about, okay, what is each one's budget, right? Like what can you afford, right? Like if you're coming with family, a family of three, you probably don't want roommates, or you might want to have like your individual floor, right? Those are all very important considerations when you're thinking about your renting property. And of course, what's included in the rent, I don't remember. For us, I think it was just the rent, and we had to pay like internet and all the utilities and stuff, and me and my friends just had to split every single month.
Yeah.
um and how to find available units. I don't even remember. I think in school we just went on Kijiji and those like rental websites, and then the school also helped us to find those available units. But Canada also has tons of like rental websites that are open um, for you to find available units. I would say though, I think challenge for newcomers is a lot of the landlords might ask for like, a deposit upfront or even like, a credit report. So that might be, some challenge to to when you're looking to rent in Canada, which is common. But I wouldn't let that, how do you say, discourage you when you see those scenarios. Just keep looking. You'll find something that fits in your budget, that fits your needs and wants, and that's also available at the same time.
For sure. Flora, one that's not as common for people just landing in Canada, but it could be buying a home. What can we know about buying a home as someone moving to Canada?
Um, I think buying a home is a very big life decision and it's a very expensive one. And a lot of the things we talked about before still applies, right? Like what's your size of family, where do you want to live, and all of that, and what you can afford. Um, I would say for newcomers who are new to the country, the first at least couple of years is probably building up your foundation, settling in the country, and talk to your financial advisor. And we have a great fantastic network of financial advisors who will help you to talk about your investment options and saving options to save for your initial down payment,
Mm.
for your house in Canada. And we also have a great team of mortgage experts, I like to call them. They're called home financing advisors, who are really specialized in mortgages and mortgages for newcomers as well, just because they know that newcomers may not have the level of deposits or savings like a lot of the Canadians do, right? So when you arrive in Canada, when we talk about the first week, set up your bank account and whatever, I would really, really highly recommend speaking to a financial advisor and ask them to help you to build out your financial plan, based on your expenses and your income, right?
Mm.
To talk about, okay, if you are planning to buy a home in Canada, whether it's a condo, townhouse, or detached home, right? What is the timeline looking like, and how much you have to put away on a monthly basis to save for that, right?
It's so fascinating because speaking to a financial advisor isn't the norm in the country that I grew up in. But I have found through the relationship that moving to Canada and Scotiabank have fostered, all of the Scotiabank people I've spoken to have been so knowledgeable and so helpful that I've actually since changed my bank that I started with when I landed to Scotiabank. And I have started that process that you're talking about, where it's like, how can I make this work? How can I get a home here? So you may be underselling yourself a little bit there. It's a phenomenal service, and I strongly encourage anyone who is thinking of it to look into it. With that in mind,
Yeah.
let's look at that first week. Um, the first week in Canada, we have kind of a theory in moving to Canada that if you front load your first week and get it done right and get set up successfully, the next 6 months are going to be so much easier. With the first week comes phone plans, SINs or SINs, or the number that you need to work and pay taxes, and then exploring. This is photo here is from our social media manager, Sarah. She wanted two kids exploring the neighborhood, and I think it's very cute. It's nice. One of the big ones, and Flora, you just spoke on it, was choosing which bank to go to. So, what are those factors that should be taken into account when choosing that first bank as a newcomer, do you think?
I think there are lots of considerations, right? And, I'm just being frank here. Like, there are lots of choices in Canada. It's really about, does the bank understand what newcomer is experiencing? Does the bank understand, your needs and wants, and does the bank offer you the things that you need to help you to survive in your first year or maybe the first couple of years in Canada, right? So for me, when I first came to Canada, I straight up just went to my aunt's bank, um, got my first, checking account and everything to set up, right? And, also ask around for your friends and family to check how their experiences is, right? But then if, like from me perspective as well, like when I came, I was 15, my English was not as good as right now. Banking was not easy. Like I was like, what do you mean? Like because in China, it's all the same card. Like it's the card that gets you like every single thing. So when I came here, I was like, what do you mean like checking accounts, savings accounts, and what do you mean like register saving accounts? Like I have no idea what those things are. And it might as well, for you, it might actually be beneficial to find a advisor who speaks your own language, right? And depending on wherever the area you are, like I know for a fact that Scotiabank branch advisor speaks like so many different languages, like from Mandarin to like, you know, Spanish, French, like all the languages that you could think about. I would highly encourage you to, go ask the bank and see if there's any bank advisors who can speak your language, right? And then that will make your journey a lot easier as well. But really, keep in touch with that financial advisor because they will help you to build your credit score, which is crucial for everything you do here in Canada. Um,
For
to
sure.
save up for your down payment, for example, right?
For sure. And we will be talking credit very shortly. But I think something you said there that I'd like to speak on very quickly is finding a bank that understands the needs of the newcomer is applicable to any company or anything that you're looking at when you land, like phone plans as well. There are certain phone plans that will give you international calling or international minutes for included in your plan. So finding ones that cater to your needs is key, and they are out there. So do your research, and you shall be rewarded for it. Let us move to getting settled. Flora, childcare. I cannot speak massively on childcare other than the articles that I have read and the conversations I've had with people who do have children in Canada. Have you any further insight into it before I give my limited knowledge?
We're in pretty much the similar boat. I'll let you get started and then I can see how much more I can add in terms of childcare and school. I do have three little cousins, so I may know a little bit. So
Nice. Certainly more than I do already. I think one of the things that I've noticed about childcare, and this comes from some of my colleagues in moving to Canada, is it can be better or worse or more financially viable or less financially viable based on the province that you're actually in. Because some provinces might be able to cater to it better or might subsidize the cost. So the way I see childcare is kind of back to choosing where to live. Certain places will be able to accommodate you and your needs and your expectations of what your life in Canada will look like with children. There is, however, said colleague I see in the comments. If you would like to mention anything, Hugo, please do feel free. I know you are passionate about this subject and far more knowledgeable than I am. But Flora, if your cousins have taught you anything, I'd love to hear it.
I think so. I'm just trying to read the questions here. I think one of the important things from what I've heard from my, friends and network of newcomers is depending on how old your child or children are, it's probably worthwhile to reach out to the local school boards before even you come to Canada to just make sure that they have spots open and that your kids will be able to attend the school, right? Because the last thing you want is that, you picked a place and then the local school doesn't have a spot and then you will have to bring your kid to a school that's in a different area and without a car in the buses and winter, it might not be the great experience, right? So I would highly recommend looking into that. And Canadian education, it is very um, open and I would say easy for children compared to a lot of the countries we might have come from. I think India, China have pretty intensive curriculums for children. When I came to Canada, it was definitely a shock, but in a good way. I was like, what do you mean school finished at 3 p.m.? What do you mean that's it for homework? It was great. I think if your children are in that boat, they will love it in Canada. So I wouldn't worry about it. And in terms of language as well, right? Like a lot of the schools will have ESL programs that your kids can attend to. Like for me, when I came to Canada, I was in ESL C and D, I think. And the teachers there are there to help your child or children to learn English and to get more used to, what the schools use in terms of their English and vocabulary and stuff. So it is going to be tough. So I would just, show as much support as you can to your children. Let them know that it's fine. And children are very welcoming as well. Like they don't even need the language to play with each other. So I wouldn't worry about it too much, but do make sure that you do your research and planning before you come to Canada for sure.
For sure. And something that I know you have a vast abundance of knowledge on is schooling in Canada because you've gone through the system. With schooling, Flora, what types of schools are available from maybe a younger age? And then I'd love to hear about your experience being a student in Canada itself and how that worked out.
Yeah, for sure. I think we can start from what we like to call is K to 12, right, in Canada. K as in kindergarten, and 12 is to grade 12. So, kindergarten to grade 8 is considered school and primary school. So, the curriculum, I think, is very like relatively easy compared to a lot of the home countries. And then grade 9 to 12 is high school, which is the part where I came in. I came in second half of grade 10. Um, so high school is a little bit more intense just because I think students will have to think about their extracurriculars and think about what they want to go for university, and they have to prepare for those university applications, right? You need to think about what kind of courses you want to take depending on what program you want to go into in university. Um, and then there is university, there is colleges and different other post-secondary institutions that you could choose from um, as well. And in terms of types of schools, there is the private schools as well that usually is a lot more expensive, whereas the public schools, a lot of them are free in terms of tuition, but you just have to also think about their school supplies, right? Like textbooks and then field trips that your kids will need to go for. For me in high school, we had like trips to New York with different kind of departments. We had trips to Washington, trip to Europe. It was great. Just something to keep in mind that even though tuition might be free, there are still like expenses in those area to think about as well.
For sure. Let us move on because I'm aware that there is now hundreds of questions, and I do want to make sure we give enough time to certainly a large portion of them. To finances, Flora, we spoke a little bit about this. Getting your finances right when you move over is so important to making sure that your move is seamless, that you don't have to stress as much. But far be it from me to speak for the expert. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what this is and a little bit more about that Start Right program.
Yeah, I'm talking definitely bias here. I'm talking about the best newcomer program in Canada that is offered by us, Scotiabank. We've actually just recently updated our offer value. It used to be 1,600, now it's up to 1,800. And you can actually get up to 550 in cash in your first year in Canada as well. So I think it's a very competitive offer, and we do look at a lot of our competitors on a daily basis. Um, And we do offer newcomer credit cards as well with no credit history required, no monthly fees on select bank accounts for your first year, just so that you don't have to worry about your banking and account fees in your first year because you have so many other things that you need to worry about in your first year in Canada as well, right? And what I love about our bank is that the advisors will be able to actually help you to set up pre-authorized payments to your credit cards, right? Let's say you have so many things in your mind and you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I will remember to pay my credit card bill on time. They will help you with that, right? You just need to make sure that your checking account has enough balance to cover your credit card balances, and the bank will do it automatically. And the other thing is again, I'm biased, but I love our Plus program, just because ever since I joined the bank, I've never had to pay for my flight back to China round trip,
Wow.
and utilize our Scene Plus program. And me and my girlfriends, like friends, are going to Vegas for next week, and I use my Scene points to book the hotel, which saved us like $2,000, right? So like, there are definitely different ways that you can take advantage of what Scotiabank has to offer. I will highly recommend you to spend some time researching on our websites, and if you're in Canada, go to one of our branches and talk to a financial advisor, and they will be more than happy to set you up and take advantage of the great offers that we have to offer.
For sure. And just for context, folks, Scene Plus is a reward scheme that Scotiabank offer through a credit card or through some credit cards. Great program, and we will be talking about credit cards in a second. Flora, the importance of budgeting, though. How did you find it when you moved over? Obviously, being 15, it worked a little bit differently. My budgeting, I don't think it could prepare me for what I was getting myself into with fees and furnishing an apartment. But without it, I think I would have fallen far, far further. What's your take on budgeting and the importance of it?
So I would say my parents were the typical like tough parents, but also with love, I think. Um, when I first came to Canada, my parents more, as a part of me trying to develop as a person as well, what they did was on top of my tuition, they gave me a set amount of money that I can use and spend in the year, on top of all the fixed expenses that's covered, right? So I was sort of forced or taught to
Wow.
do budgeting at a very young age, right? When I was in high school, there wasn't too much expenses, just Tuny Tuesdays at KFC and things like that to hang out with friends. But it is very important to build a budget, especially when you're figuring out your first, year in Canada, I would say, right? Think about what are the expenses that you have to make, right? Your rent, your utilities, your phone bill, right? Your Wi-Fi. What are the things that are nice to have, like nice dinner or Uber Eats,
Yeah.
takeouts? Those things are optional, but nice to have, right? Like, take those kind of considerations into your budget as you're thinking about your expenses, right? Money incoming and money outgoing should have a positive balance, right? Like we as bankers, we always like to recommend, you should save at least 20 to 30% of your income um, on a regular basis. But I know and I understand it's going to be tough for you to save that much money probably in your first year, just because you have so many expenses in your first year and you may not be making that much for you to save, right? So it's totally understandable. Saving like a little bit is better than nothing, right? But do keep in mind and have that buffer of, saving and having that emergency fund that you constantly sort of contributing money to, just in case if anything happens, you have sort of a safe net to fall back to, right?
For sure. Well said. Let us move to our penultimate slide, which is credit cards. The value of credit cards, and here we have the credit card with Scene Plus. Uh, we can do this a little bit more high level, Flora, because we do actually have a Scotiabank credit card video where we go deep dive into everything credit cards coming out on the Moving to Canada YouTube channel very shortly in the next 2 or 3 weeks, I believe. So I would love to hear your thoughts, though, on credit cards and credit history and the importance of it as a newcomer and how to make it work for you.
Yeah, for sure. I think when you're a student, your options are rather limited. Doesn't mean like, it's not important because it's still important to build out that credit history, when you're a student, especially when you're thinking about becoming a foreign worker and eventually permanent residence in the future. But once you become a foreign worker and then PR, the options are how do you say that? Like there's so many options available for you depending on your needs and wants, right? Like we have cashback cards that are available that gives you a certain percentage of cashback based on your transactions. Like what we mentioned before, we have the Steam Plus rewards program that gives you points based on your daily transactions as well, and you can redeem those points for grocery bills. You can redeem those points for hotels and flight tickets and even
Tickets to
your
Vegas.
car rental. Yeah, Vegas. There's so many different options that are available, and they are all available for newcomers. Either you're international student, foreign worker, or permanent residents, we have something available for you. So I would really highly recommend to speak with one of our financial advisors, and they will provide you with all the details as they are the best at it. But then also keep an eye on the video that's coming out, and I haven't seen it, so I'm gonna be really, really looking forward to that, Stephen.
Well, it's very cool, and I certainly learned a lot while I was shooting it. But folks, if you do want to learn anything right now, we do have a link posted in our comment section there. Please feel free to check it out to learn more all about Scotiabank credit cards. Flora, that actually brings us to a little slide where we let people know how to get in touch with Scotiabank should they desire. So folks, here it is. Please do feel free to reach out. Finding your closest branch if you're already here is probably the simplest way. And Flora, you've spoken it briefly, but you can find who speaks what language in the branches through the website. Really useful resource. So go check it out. Get in touch with them. I'm a big advocate. I've switched to Scotiabank and will be holding that credit card, the Scene Plus rewards, and getting my trips to Vegas very shortly. But let us jump on to what I imagine a few people, if not most, are here to see, which is the questions. Flora, I'm going to try and filter through these questions while looking at the screen here, and we'll try and grab a few that is most pertinent. I also have some that are popping up on my other screen here, so we might be jumping between the both, but I'd love to get your opinion on this. These are all after we joined. Supply chain manager, hoping to move to Newfoundland and Labrador. Very cool. Where's the best province to advance in my supply chain management career? It's a great question, and it's great to see people thinking about where they can advance their career in terms of where they're moving to. I don't have much of a comment on it, Flora. I imagine some port city might be the easiest, potentially.
Mm, I would say though there is probably opportunities in supply chain anywhere, but I'm not a supply chain
Yeah.
expert, right? Like Google probably does it better than me or Steven. But do your research if there is a best province to that has a lot of supply chain jobs. I would assume probably some rural areas with a lot of like warehouses and factories,
Mm.
which is good because you probably get like a decent paid job and not so much living expenses. So.
For sure. Well said. This is one, Flora, that maybe we can speak a little bit more on, even with Scotiabank. As an international student, how can I get a loan to fund my studies without getting a cosigner? Is it possible? Can it be done? What does Scotiabank offer for international students?
Yeah, I think for international student loans, it is a little challenging. I need to spend a little bit more time to look into that. I don't believe that's something we offer at this point. But there is a big but. Even, if that area is not available, right? There are tons of scholarships that, Scotiabank is funding as well. That's open for international students as well as students as well. You can go to our website and check out what are the different scholarship opportunities as well, but also get in touch with your schools. Like all kinds of different post-secondary institutions will have different rewards and scholarships, either based on academic performance or based on financial need. I would highly recommend you having a conversation with them as well. So maybe not as well on the, like, maybe so much not on the loan perspective, but think about scholarship and rewards that you can potentially get your hands on.
Very, very well said. Um, let's see if we can find some more. I moved to Toronto from Tampa, Florida. Big adjustment, but with the right clothes, no problem. I think that's in relation to our comments about the cold and the weather, Flora. Let's see what else we got here.
Yeah.
Do I need to wait to apply for a job in Canada in the banking sector, or can I apply from abroad? What's your thoughts on this?
I don't think you need to wait. I don't think you need to wait to apply for a job in Canada. Um, Especially a lot of these interviews are done virtually anyway. From the first, either it's a call or this the phone interview. But banking sector is also like very big, right? Like within the banking sector, there are so many different kinds of roles. Like if you think about Scotiabank, right, we have the technology team that's probably a little bit more virtual. We have like us, that's sort of hybrid, right? But we have also the branch employees who are a lot more in person. So
Hmm.
depending on the area of the banking sector you want to go to, you may actually be able to apply and interview and maybe even get a job offer letter before you even arrive in Canada. So there's definitely opportunities there.
For sure. Well said. Flora, it seems like you like dogs. I can't remember what that's in relation to. Do you like dogs?
I like, I like all animals.
Well said. Hi, I am a retired banker. Is anyone advice or share a way or course to add to my profile? Okay, I'm going to try and just sum this up. I think it's a retired banker who wants to take a course to help get back into banking or entering back into the bank. I think anything that you might recommend or know of or speak on a kind of a high level about.
Um, I think it goes back to the question of what area of the bank you want to get into, right? If you're talking about the front line, there is the Canadian Security course. That is
Mhm.
a really good course for financial planning and financial advisors. Similar to that, there is IFIC. I don't know the full name. Investment Financial Planning, something like that. That's also a certificate that you could get. Um, those are probably the two good, I guess, courses or certificates that I would recommend if you're thinking about the retail sort of lens of
Mhm.
banking. And for other areas of the banking, right, like different teams will have different kinds of skills. And then depending on the skill sets, for example, you know, project management will be a great course if you're looking into get to the project management offices within the bank, right? Or analytics, right?
Mm.
The coding languages like SQL and all of that fun stuff. There are so many courses online for those as well. So yeah, I would say depending on which area of the bank you are trying to get into, there are different courses to take
Cool.
or exams to pass
Cool.
to get back into banking in Canada.
Well, let's take the question just underneath it. So we had a question about not having a co-signer. This one's a little bit more straightforward. Can international students get loans to support tuition fees?
I don't believe so at this point, at least from the Scotia perspective, but I believe there are organizations that do provide those opportunities. So I would, I'm not an expert on that, but I would recommend looking into it. Probably something related to like, nonprofit
Hmm.
or, different organizations that could help with that.
Cool. What about opening a bank account before actually arriving in Canada? That's from Robin. Can that be done, Flora, through Scotiabank?
Yeah, so Scotiabank actually offers a program for customers who are coming from certain countries abroad to open a bank account and transfer up to $50,000 before you arrive in Canada as well. All the information are on our website. I highly recommend you go and check out what are the countries that are eligible and what the process looks like. In my opinion, I think this is a really great program because I was the kid who showed up with like a lot of cash at the border and it was not offending for a 50-year-old. But it was the questioning, but then also it was, I was just constantly worried that I had cash and I'm gonna lose it, right? So this program is going to be really helpful to help you to get your, first, I guess, first amount of money in
Yeah,
Canada as you're planning your arrival in Canada.
for sure. The fear of losing your whole your whole bank balance is terrifying. Let me see what else we got here. Quickest and easiest. I submitted my resume because I am outside of Canada. Canada's my dream country. Um, Scotiabank give loans, international student loans. Another interesting one from Robin, and it's language I don't fully understand, Flora, so tell me to scroll past if you want. Can a Canadian living in Canada own a US, is that, it might be inheritance IRA. We might be getting into like the nuts and bolts of real financial literacy here, so maybe it's something that we don't have an answer to.
I personally don't have an answer to, and I don't really understand the question
Hmm.
either.
Do you know what, Robin?
Um,
If you're still here, this is one where I think if going into a branch and kind of sitting down with an advisor and explaining all the circumstance around it might serve you very very well. And if we do happen to find the answer, we will post it in the group as we search for a few more questions. Guys, we're going to be going about 5 minutes over just to get a few more of these questions in, um, just to make sure we can answer as much as we can. Flora, here's an interesting one that I'd love to get your opinion on. If I earn as $3,000 a month, can I get a mortgage and a car loan? Now it's circumstantial and it's based on so many things, but the ability to get mortgages and the ability to get car loans. What's your thoughts on these things for different pay scales?
Yeah, and I agree with you, Stephen. There are so many dependencies on that. The short answer is yes, you can get a mortgage and a car loan, depending on your status in Canada, but then also depending on your expenses as well, right? Like, we want to be transparent here. If you make 3,000 and spend 3,000, you probably won't be able to get a mortgage and a car loan. But if there is room of flexibility there, the financial advisor will be able to help you with um, the car loan, or the home financial advisors will be able to help you to guide you through the mortgage conversations.
For sure.
But
And
also depending on what kind of property you're looking to own, right?
yeah, if you're looking for a waterfront property in West Vancouver or Shaughnessy, maybe not. But yeah, yeah. Flora, let's take the question below it. Someone wants to work in Scotiabank. How can they even look at job listings, or where can they find them? What's the first step they need to take?
Short answer is our careers website. If you go to our website and then you scroll to the bottom, there is the careers button that you can click into. But if you also want to just do a quick Google search about newcomer jobs at Scotiabank or newcomer hiring program at
Mm,
Scotiabank, we actually have a um, good really good, and for me really really great focus to hire newcomers, just because we see the value of newcomers, that they bring so many different perspectives and language skills, right, into the bank, but then the global experience as well is very crucial and helpful. And we also, want to support newcomers as they navigate through this journey, right? Just because for a big organization like that, we have so many job opportunities to offer as well. So, highly recommend you to take a look and see if there's anything you're interested in, and go from there.
For sure. Let us scroll down. Is it possible to open an account without being in the country? Yes, we did indeed just answer that. Let's see what we have down a little bit lower. This was a very informative session from Flora. Thank you, Shirley. Can we open a bank account before coming to Canada? We have indeed just answered that one. Let's see what else we got. I have a few here that's being sent through some other platforms. Flora, before I ask the question, have you any experience with North Bay, Ontario?
No.
No. Alexandra, I'm very sorry. We don't have specific experience of it, so we'd only be making things up. However, there is an abundance of resources on the Moving to Canada website that should be able to help you. I'm going to make sure and get that link into the chat very shortly. Let me get the other screen up with the other last few questions. One question came in: is homeschooling popular in Canada? It's not something I've heard much about, but Flora, you know anyone being homeschooled?
I've only know one person who homeschooled both of their kids in the past 11 years of me being in Canada and talking to people with kids and everything. I think most people still prefer to take their kids to, school, just because I think they also appreciate some alone time. But homeschooling is definitely the option for people who are thinking about pursuing that. It's definitely a lot more effort on the parents and family side, but it is definitely an option. But I would say it's not as popular as the schools, like the public and private school system here.
And I have very limited experience of it, but I think I'd mirror what you've just said. It seems to be not as popular based on what I know. Sash, Wealth and Wellness, good day. What if you missed the live presentation? Is it recorded so I can get a recap, please? You'll be happy to know it is recorded, and it will be up on all the channels in probably about an hour after this being finished. So you can recap there and get all of Flora's knowledge bombs for infinity, because they were fabulous and very, very interesting to have an insight from someone like Flora. Flora, that's it. We've come to the end of our live stream. Folks, a lot of you have asked in the comments about how to move and visas questions and things that weren't quite related to what we were talking about today. But we do want to try and help you as much as possible. So please do make your way over to the Moving to Canada website, where you can get so much more information about that particular topic. Flora, though, thank you for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having us. I truly, truly enjoyed it. And thank you for everyone for participating and asking all of your great questions.
For sure. 180 comments on Facebook and YouTube alone. We have one more from Robin, who is still here. Let's see if we can answer it in any way, or if we can even point them in the right direction. My question about the IRA is an investment question. I was told I may need to convert the IRA to an RRSP. Flora, can we point them in the right direction, or do you have any insight into this whatsoever before we sign off? Let's leave Robin with a win.
Yes, so those are definitely questions that our investment and financial advisors will be able to help you with that, just because they deal with this on a regular basis. They have a lot of customers who came from US to Canada, and they are educated about this tax and implications and a lot of that. Not me personally, but I would highly recommend reaching out to a financial advisor at one of the branches, or an investment specialist, and they will help you with that for sure.
Cool. Robin, best of luck with the move. It sounds like your planning is gone much further than some of us. But on that note, Flora, I am going to let you go get back to your day. Folks, thank you so much for joining. This will be up and to recap in about an hour's time. But until then, goodbye for now.
Thank you.